Well, welcome everyone to the Badge and Beyond. Hello, Anthony. It's been a while.
Hello, Danny. It's now been 15 minutes.
Yes. And today's episode is going to be a nice one. We're going to talk about when we've done all the preparation, done all the hard work, and things don't exactly go to plan.
Yes.
I believe you have some interesting experiences in that space.
I'd like to say everything I ever touched was golden.
Yeah. No?
Not in this instance,
Okay.
no. Let's go back a few years to, I think it was around 2007. I was working at Maroubra, and it was as I think I've said before, it was a fairly busy command, but when you have a busy command, you have a high turnover of staff, and myself and two of the other guys that had been on the detectives course with me were the only people that were designated detectives in the office. And by virtue of that, that meant that I think multiple times we were all acting sergeants because we'd lost sergeants, they hadn't replaced them, and people go on leave and things. So this was one of those times where I think we had one sergeant that was on leave for part of the time, and all the rest of us were acting sergeants. So of course, the story commences when there's an armed robbery, and one of the junior guys in the office, who I'd say was less than vigorous in his investigation activities, had actually done a reasonable job and realised that there was something going on here. It was potentially an inside job. So in the course of doing his armed robbery investigation, now this is in the background, I'm paying attention to it, but he wasn't my problem at that time. And the investigation's evolving, and then before we know it, he's gone and gotten telephone intercepts. Mm-hmm. So the telephone intercept, for those of you at home, is effectively when we're listening to telephone calls that you're having live.
Tapping phones.
Tapping phones, yes. And let me tell you, there's a whole process to it. It's got to go, you write these long affidavits, they've got to go before judges to get signed off. There's limited lines that the New South Wales Police can tap at any one time. So it's often quite a process to do.
Yep.
So here's this guy, and he's going in every day listening to the calls. You can listen live, but also they get recorded and you listen to them. So, if something happens overnight and no one's listening to them, you go back and listen to them. So during the week, he's listening, trying to get information about this previous armed robbery. And then he becomes aware that they're planning another job. Now, this is one of those times where it really highlighted to me doing this operation that the general public just don't know what's going on around them. You don't see it. There's a lot of covert police activity that even when you see elements of it, you're like, nah, nothing really happening. And that'll become a little bit clearer later on. So there is a large warehouse somewhere in Sydney that carries much of the think of it a warehouse for chemists for the Ministry of Health. So they obviously have a lot of dangerous drugs there and useful drugs if you're looking at drug supply in the future. And these guys have identified where this warehouse is, and they're doing recce's on it. And
what do you mean by a recce?
A recce, so they're doing reconnaissance, so hostile surveillance on this warehouse.
Yep.
They've identified security, and they're using a code word that we believe to be related to firearms.
Yep.
Except the problem is the code word they're using is also a normal kind of thing, as you would expect. But it could be used to gain access to this premises. So it's either a firearm or something that might be able to be used, or something completely different.
Yeah.
And so there's this talk about, have you got this item? Have you got this item? Yes, I'm getting the item. I've got the items. I think I've got the items. They're lined up, ready to go. And this progresses during the time. They're talking about this location. And to add just the constant pain in the ass that this investigation becomes, they're talking sometimes in a foreign language. So I think it was Italian or Greek that they were talking in. And they're talking about this item. Let's, for instance, call it, we'll say the code word. That wasn't the word, but let's just call it that. Have you got, yes, I've got the, but it's like Greek or Italian or something else. Yep. So for us to get an interpreter in the cops, you have to pay for an interpreter. And they're not cops. And then they have to come in and listen to these things, and they don't listen live with you. You have to select the calls, and so you're getting this information kind of secondhand. And then we're trying to identify police anywhere we can that speak this language to bring them in. And listen to
that process really well.
Yeah. You may or may not have been part of those kind of things before.
Yeah.
And the thing to understand too is you don't, for telephone intercepts, you don't have that booth in your office.
No.
So you just go in and go, log into my computer. Yes, I'll go listen to these. You were going into an office in the city. It was in the city at the time.
Yep.
You're on the fringe of the city.
Yep.
And you sit in these rooms, no windows, no nothing.
Yep.
And it is boring as hell. When you've cleared the calls and there's nothing else happening, and and you think about your own life, there's a lot of mundane calls you make, and you don't know when that's going to turn into something big.
Absolutely.
So here's this poor junior detective going in, and then he comes back and says, I think we've got something. Are they going to go do this job? So we start working it up, and he's working it up. And anyway, we're like, okay, we know they're going to hit it supposedly on the weekend. That's what it looks like. But we've got no evidence, really, outside of thinking this guy's done an armed robbery. There's about 3 of these guys before. We think he's involved before. He's setting up something new. There's possible firearms. We've got a location, but then what? There's not enough to lock up. We don't know where the firearms are. We can't even 100% confirm there's firearms, but we think there is, and we think it's this location. But again, what if they change their mind? But also, the location they're going to hit is staffed. So if they hit this location with firearms, well, there's a potential murder could take place. Mm-hmm. So there's all these what ifs, but also was potentially nothing. And that is so often the case in the cops. Is like, it's a massive deal, except also it could just be nothing, and you've got to balance the risk with the resource cost. So some of the times we're arguing with different commanders because this requires a full-scale response. We need surveillance. We need our team of investigators. We need someone listening to the phones. We need interpreters regularly. But we also need the SWAT team, so TOU. And what you may not know is that TOU don't have a full team rostered all the time. They have what they'd call an assessment team, which is a smaller team that does the immediate response and assessment to manage jobs, and then they have a wider on-call, people all over Sydney that come in depending on what the job is. So we only get the information is constantly evolving, so this isn't rostered. Yep. All these guys we're going to bring in to work across the weekend is overtime. And I remember these conversations with overtime, and to add to the mix, brand new crime manager, second in command inspector that I'm reporting to, who doesn't know me and I don't know him, right? So on the Friday night, we're liaising with the acting inspector that's been working there, and then on the Saturday night, it's a brand new inspector that I've never worked with before, and this is my first job. And so effectively, they go out, they've got surveillance, they've got TOU working Friday night, and these guys don't do anything, right? They move around, they're kind of looking at a couple of locations, but they end up having to call it off because they're like, it was one car and our surveillance team. The surveillance team is like 6 cars.
Yeah.
And they're like, we are, and what they call a jam car. So actually, yeah, the Friday night, they didn't have TOU because they only had, a jam car is kind of like when you have a team of investigators, like a couple of investigators that are there to protect surveillance and to stop the car or protect an undercover or do something so that the surveillance team don't have to break cover. So they're all out, middle of the night, roaming around. They're like, there's just those crooks on the road and us, and it's pretty obvious that they're being surveilled. Not much we can do. So we broke off. The information comes in. Saturday, myself and one of the other junior detectives are working around. I'm constantly on the phone. I'm listening to getting information from telephone intercept, speaking to this new inspector, trying to organise resources like TOU and things, but I'm also acting as jam car out with the surveillance team. So, we're out from 8 a.m. in the morning, we're following these guys all over the eastern suburbs, and then they're making calls and it looks like the job's on for that night. So, okay, we're all in, we're going again. I think I went home for 2 hours at the end of the shift. And the reason they did that, mind you, was to reduce the overtime for that. So some guys came in at 5 at the end of my shift, and then I came back at 7 or 8. But I'd had to organise TOU. There needs a new surveillance team we'd organise, and highway patrol.
Yep.
Because if we were going to have to do a stop on these guys and they ran, we needed a highway car. I go home, I come back, we do a briefing. Now the interesting thing is, and this is a leadership thing from me, I'm the acting sergeant. This is probably one of my first times running a big job. I've got a new inspector I don't know. I'm liaising with the guy in TIB, constantly getting updates from surveillance from TIB for the telephone intercept branch, constantly doing all this liaison. But I'm the guy. I'm driving, and this offsider, I've got this junior detectives in the side passenger seat, and we're jam cars, so you're not watching, you're just sitting off listening, and he's falling asleep. I'm like, okay. And so I go to give him an update, and he's like, oh, there he's got his eyes closed. I'm like, I get, look, we've been doing some bulk hours, forget it. The end of that shift when I'm doing planning and stuff, he's got the shits. And I'm like, mate, what's going on with you? What's wrong? I've been driving around all day, you haven't given me a single brief, you don't tell me what we're doing. I'm like, well, if you had your frickin' eyes open at any point in time when I tried to talk to you, I could give you an update. Did you want to handle the phone? Did you want to help me out? Do you want to offer, or did you just want to make me do it all? Like, get in as teamwork. But, understanding personalities,
Yep.
I didn't really know him well. He didn't know me that well. And he was an older guy that I think he'd previously been an AMBO and then come to the cops. And so there was this, like, I was younger than him, but I was senior to him.
Yeah.
And so I think, and I was on edge too, like, so much going on. So there was kind of that thing going on. And then I remember the guy that ran the job, this young detective comes in and he's like, it's all going down. Where am I going? I'm like, you're going to TIB to listen to the calls. What? But this is my job. And I'm like, yeah, I get it's your job, but you're also one of the most junior guys in the office. You know the phones, right? You know the system, because it's not something a lot of people have used recently, so you have to be au fait with the system.
Yep.
You're on the warrant that you can actually listen to it.
Yep.
But you understand which voice is who, which number makes sense. And when we're on the road and you've got TOU and surveillance going, you need to be on the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
It's very important.
It's a massive role, but it feels like I'm leaving you out.
Yeah.
That's how he felt. But that wasn't what I was doing. But he was just the right guy at that point in time. So I go away, I come back, we get ready, everybody's kidded up. We've got myself in what becomes what they call Van 100, which is kind of like the command car. I got 2 teams of detectives of like, I think there's 3 or 4 guys in each car, because there's going to be arrests and there's potentially going to be search warrants.
Yep.
And 3 offenders, I think it was 6, because there was going to be 2 detectives for each person. And when you do the lockup, there's the search the car, photographs, video, crime scene, all the rest of that.
Yep.
And then we organised to go meet at a covert location. I've got the surveillance team leader comes in. I've got TOU. TOU turn up. To understand TOU, they've got their team. So they've got like 3 4-wheel drives, big dark 4-wheel drives, and then a white van turns up. I'm like, what's a white van? SCAT paramedics, right? Because they've got there's a possibility they're going to go into what's effectively a shit show.
Yeah.
Fire's going to be laid down. Someone's going to get shot. There's innocent people on site.
Yeah.
TOU have their own SCAT guys that train with them and work with them. So they're AMBOs, but they come on site, but they have a covert vehicle.
Yeah.
So we're all sitting there, and I get introduced to the TOU inspector. I've got the new inspectors like, I love you, but I don't know you kind of thing. I'm going to come out and help you run the job, even though I don't know much about the job. I'm like, cool. So we're all going to be in car 100. Talking to the TOU guy, I've got to organise the highway patrol. Highway patrol guys come on shift. They're Eastern Suburbs highway patrol guys from Rose Bay. I'm like, this is the job. This is what we're doing. I can't have you come to the covert location because you need to be in a marked car.
Yeah.
Because of the policy.
Yeah.
So here's the briefing over the phone. Go to Kingsford Macca's and wait there. We obviously got call it the caravan of courage or whatever you want to call it. Because the surveillance team moves with the crook.
Yeah.
But the TOU team, our team, everybody else kind of moves behind in this kind of like a extended snake kind of concept.
Yeah.
But Highway Patrol being the only marked car and not wanting to spook these guys, not wanting to be seen, and you never know whether they're going to do anti-surveillance and double back. They need to be well back.
Yeah.
They need to be close enough to come up and take over the pursuit. So I'm like, just hang there. We're all operating on a back channel, so not the main channel, and we'll go.
Yep.
So we continue, we go on, and these guys will move around, they stop, they get fuel, they pull in a service station like, is this it? Are they going to do a job at the servo? All right, everybody's kind of like, okay, are we ready? No, they drive out.
Yep.
They go get a kebab. All right, kebab shop? What? Oh, maybe there's nothing, you know?
Yeah.
We're travelling like this all over Sydney.
Yeah.
I go, and every time you're like, hang on, where are we at? It's like, so we kicked off about 8 o'clock, mind you. It's about 2 a.m., 2:30. They're at the location.
Okay.
And they park the car, probably like 500 metres away, and they get out, all three of them. One of them's hanging with the car, and the other two are mooching around. They walk through like a park location, get there, and we're like, okay, do we jam? Like, do we get them beforehand? Of course, all my other cars, TAU and everybody else, is set up, and all the investigators are tired. And then we get a radio call. The tactical operations inspector behind me gets a radio call and goes, oh, really? And you know, when you hear that, you're like, that's not on my comms. I said, what? What have you heard? He said, yeah, my operators are behind one of your D's cars and someone's just turned on the siren. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Oh, no.
So they're sitting in the car waiting, all in darkness in a side street, and in the D's cars you have like the little switch.
Yep.
He's bumped it with his knee, and then in the dark couldn't find it to turn it off. So it's like, everybody's heard it. Like, you know, it's not just been like... And of course, the surveillance team are doing a mad job. Like, they are trying to follow these guys on foot, 2 a.m. in the morning when there's no pedestrian traffic around.
Yeah,
there's no vehicular traffic.
Yeah.
And man, they're killing it. They're absolutely doing a wicked job. And we come back, and the surveillance guy and team leader says, look, what do you want to do? You know, where are we going? And I'm talking to the inspector, and we're trying to make a call. And like, they haven't committed an offence. They're just walking around.
Yeah.
And there's no information to prove that they've got the guns. We don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, they go back to the car, and we're still calling on the back channel, and these guys drive off, and we're heading back towards their home. And we're going to southwest Sydney. So we've gone from Eastern Beaches, inner west, towards the city, back out west, and now we're going back towards Campsie. And we're coming through the back streets of Campsie, and I'm like, all right, I think we'll call it Rose Bay 200. Rose Bay 200, I need you to come up and stop that vehicle. We just want to do a search on it.
Yeah.
We'll come in behind as a coat, we'll get the investigators come in behind you to give you support, but we just want to stop them to see what's in the car if they do have the firearms and potentially be armed and dangerous.
Yeah.
We'll just see.
Yep.
No worries, where are you? We're on this street that we've been calling with the surveillance team. That's where we are. Yeah, it's going to take us about half hour to get there. I'm like, where are you? We're still in the Kingsford McDonald's car park, like you said.
Oh, no.
I was like, what?
Oh, no.
And, I had that moment of self-doubt. I'm like, I threw the radio down in disgust. And I said to the inspector behind me, like the tactical ops guy, because he was in the car, I'm like, did I not tell them to follow? He said, no, you were very clear. You told them to follow. I heard it. I made sure you told them that. I'm like,
oh, wow.
Oh, my God. Those guys have sat in the car park of Macca's kilometres away.
The whole time?
The whole time. Listening to this job, doing nothing, drinking coffee and my God. So, here I am, myself, my inspector and the tactical ops inspector pull up this car and do just a random search, say we're from anti-theft squad locally.
Yeah.
And the giveaway was probably the fact that we had this big-ass four-wheel drive sitting probably 50 metres back.
Yeah.
Because everybody, you're treating it like these guys are possibly going to go off.
Yeah.
And while we search this car, we find inside a soap dish where they had and inside the soap dish was a piece of soap that had the impression of a key in it.
Right.
But we're doing a vehicle stop. We haven't, we're not seizing anything. Right, we're trying to keep it covert, but see what's going on. We didn't find a firearm or anything. So I don't take a photo. I don't do any of that. I'll let it go, but I'll make a note of it. And I say to them, look, your car's not registered, mate. We found out the car wasn't registered. We knew that. You can't drive it anymore because we're trying to stop them from using that car, which we knew was going to be the car they used in the offence. And that would just buy us time for the next day. So we go back, we regroup. That guy leaves it, operations off, and then all of a sudden operations back on for Sunday night. Except this time the surveillance team leader rings me and goes, well, mate, we've got a bit of a problem. I'm like, oh, what's that? Like, well, the car's still where we pulled it up. Like, okay. I said, well, how is that a problem? Like, you know where they are, right? Well, yes and no, but we had a tracker on the car. So that was helping us with the surveillance. So now we've got to retrieve the tracker and then we've got to put it on a different car. I'm like, why didn't you tell me you had a tracker on the car? I wouldn't engage with that strategy. But no, I did.
Wow.
No one told me.
Yeah. So
they're like, well, we do that sometimes. I'm like,
that's great.
I've never worked with this team leader before for surveillance team. I don't know any of that.
Yeah.
Like I said, great operators, but just lack of communication.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Sunday night, TOU, no highway patrol, and surveillance team. But Sunday night's a different ballgame. They're again going around doing everything, they're moving around. Surveillance team is moving, but we're pretty sure we know the location now. So instead of us following around everywhere and having some constable plod detective put his knee on a siren switch, we'll go and we found an ambo station nearby, really close. Like, do you mind if we set up here in your meal room?
Yeah.
You know, ambos are great. Yeah. They're like, yeah, whatever. So now everybody can stretch their legs and we can just keep abreast of things. And the surveillance team have pole air up, which makes everything that much easier because we may not have a tracker on the car.
And pole air is?
Pole air is police air wing, right? So
yeah,
the helicopter can fly really high. They've got great cameras. They've got thermals. They've got everything else. They can spot this car everywhere. And then come about, I think it's 11 o'clock at night, surveillance team leader rings me, goes, oh, we've got a problem. I'm like, what's the problem? And we're about to lose air wing. I'm like, what do you mean? I've got an inspector here, he'll authorise the overtime. Yeah, the pilot doesn't feel like doing overtime and we can't make him. So...
Oh, wow.
We're out. we just lost him. I'm like... Now, why this is a really big problem for the investigation is Sunday night. Think about Sunday night travelling all over Sydney. Again, you've got this problem. There's no cars. Yeah. There's no coverage for the surveillance team. So you've got 6 guys, 6 cars, and the crook. And they have to be really close.
Too much exposure.
And these guys are speeding everywhere.
Yeah.
So to keep up, you have to speed, which identifies you as being surveillance. So like, oh, now what do we do, right? So we've lost air wing. We lose the car. Okay, well, we think it's this location, so we set up around this location. We listen to the phones. And we're looking, you can see the towers they're operating, but they look like they're close and then they're not. Something changes and they're moving away and they're going home. But then they go straight past home, but we're only getting the cell towers off the movement of the car when they're making phone calls.
Yep.
Like, what the hell is going on? And they're going to Wollongong. And then we work out they've conducted a kidnapping in Wollongong. I'm in Sydney with a team of detectives and a tactical operations team and a surveillance team. Everything you need to interdict a kidnapping.
Yeah.
Only problem is I have no idea where it's at.
Yeah.
I have no idea. It's going to take me an hour and a half to get down there. I don't know who they've kidnapped. I don't know what's going on. We don't have them we can't triangulate to a good location.
Yep.
And they're moving around.
Yeah.
So now I'm running an operation with potentially kidnappings can lead to murder.
Yeah.
And a body being buried somewhere.
Yeah.
And I've got all the resources in the world and nothing.
Yep.
And eventually we're like, I'm ringing people and calling the commander down there and briefing people and going, and then everybody's asking the same question, where? Like, I don't know where. And it's getting close to dawn now. Okay, well, I've got nothing. We work out through the phone calls that they've released the guy because it's someone that they've had some kind of underworld dealing with.
Yep.
There was money owed, there was a debt, there was something. You know how these things go.
Yep.
And he's been released and we figure he's safe. And in the next few days we worked out where he was, but they never come back to this location. So we end up charging them with a conspiracy. We've gone to all this effort, we've dedicated all this money, and then weeks before you do your statement, and then you don't go to court for weeks and weeks. And you do your statement, and it's months afterwards. And I said to this young guy, I'm like, mate, I need my statement back because I know I'm going to have to go to court and give evidence. Like, yeah, no worries. And I said, I need a photo of the car because one of the big things is that soap dish with the key imprint, because that's a big part of the conspiracy.
Yeah.
And where I found that in the car. I remembered where it was in the seat, but I couldn't remember. It was one of those cars if it was 2 doors or 4 doors. I need a photo of the car. He's like, I don't have a photo of the car proper. I've only got like inside the car and stuff. I'm like, my goodness, right? So I'm looking through. I'm trying to find. There's no photos of the external of the car, and I'm looking. I got nothing. So I'll go to court and I give my evidence. My evidence is solid. And the one question I feared was exactly what the lawyer said to me. He says, so you have a clear, and you're being set up. He says, so detective, you've got a clear recollection of that night? I'm like, yes. And you remember, you've got a clear memory? Yes. And you found the soap dish where? And I explained it. Right. Was that a 2-door or a 4-door car? I was like, I believe it was a 4-door car. And then he produces a photo of the car that they've taken as 2 doors.
Yep.
And just, shot my credibility down. And I think through a number of factors, not just because of that, but because of the brief. And it was weak. And like I said, it's a conspiracy. So you're already pushing things uphill because you're trying to get it over the line.
Yeah.
And it pissed me off even more that old mate comes back to me, the detective that's running, and goes, I can't believe you didn't remember what type of car it is. You ruined my brief. I'm like, oh, mate, you ruined your brief yourself. That wasn't on me, but, it's still, honestly, I was the acting sergeant. I should have, and at an earlier time, identified that, I just thought taking a photo of the outside of the car and knowing that would have been standard, that's something I would have done, something I would have expected of anyone.
Yeah.
But he was junior and I missed it. He missed it.
Yeah.
And so, but point being is, here's a time when you've potentially got something that's nothing, potentially got everything, ends up in a kidnapping, you've got all the resources, nothing to show for it. And huge learning curve and a lot of pressure too.
Of course it is. It is. Oh yeah.
I think I had like, I don't know, 6-7 years in the job at that time. Like I wasn't long a senior constable and you're making big calls.
Yeah. Very serious jobs, and especially when you've got firearms, anything can go wrong.
Yeah.
Doing a dangerous vehicle stop without a marked car, without highway.
Yeah. I felt pretty safe for the TAU guys behind me.
Yeah. But it's more the administrative backlash.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? What is your...
Look, he triggered a couple of memories for me, but one of them was I think with the exception of Link Cafe, my longest shift. Mm-hmm. As you were talking about people, that speak a different language, they get brought in because we're just cheaper than interpreters, which is basically what it boils down to. But also we understand what we're looking for.
Yeah. And you're trustworthy, right?
Yeah, that became my world in my first 6 weeks as a police officer.
Yeah, wow.
I did my first intercept at that stage, so that my language skills were quite sought after in those days. So luckily or unluckily, I became the go-to for that stuff.
Yeah.
And because there were so many different dialects and I was au fait with all of them, I would get contacted frequently. And this one was funny because I was just walking down the corridor and one of the detective sergeants calls me. He goes, hey, do you just pop in and listen to this for me? And he plays the tape and I'm hearing the conversation and it was a weird sentence. And I went, okay. And he gives me no background of this job, nothing.
Yeah.
So there's 2 more calls. I listen to the other 2 calls and I say to him, sounds to me like there's someone asking questions about a possible shooting. And then he just looks at the other detective there and he goes, all right, come in. Can you listen to some more? So anyway, that develops into, I think from memory, 6 months. A 6 months job where I'm every single day listening.
Ooh.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
But it was so important because it was more than one murder that was involved. And so I worked on this for a long time. And it's just all these underworld figures. Just, it was massive. It was a very, very big job, and multiple agencies involved too. And I'm like this junior constable trying to work out what the hell's going on.
Yeah, they're running major actions.
Yeah.
And staging things and strategy off what you say it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're not a qualified interpreter.
No.
Right? Like, you've never been tested to know if you understand that language.
No.
Yeah.
And what did it for me, that embedded me there, was me cracking the code.
Right.
So then I worked out what they used code for firearm. And they ended up doing a search warrant and found the gun, right, at this premises. So then we're like, okay, this is good. We're slowly knocking over things. Anyway, my management were happy. They were getting great kudos. I got rubbish. But anyway, so one particular night, I'm going into TIB to listen to these, to more calls. Because you got to understand too, as things happen, you uncover other crimes who are just as serious. So then they're like, now we're running multiple briefs, multiple investigations. So now you're listening for this one group, then listening for the other group, right, to help them out. So then the initial investigation team got split into two, and I'm listening for both, right? Great fun. No. And one particular night, I know it very well because it was a major sporting event that night. So everyone else was off enjoying the sporting event.
Yep.
And there's me in this stupid building listening to calls, and I got extremely good at that system. And you have all these templates running for yourself, and then you start to get good at knowing what the detectives need to renew the warrant, to ask for more things. And because people, these crooks, they drop phones and pick up phones.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just going, this is the new number, this is where we're going, bang, 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 bang. Anyway, so very early in my shift, I work out there's going to be a serious incident, and they're going to actually go and drop off one firearm to another group who are then going to go. And it was either commit another murder, right, or kidnap the bloke.
Ooh, yeah.
So both things quite serious.
Neither of those are good options.
No, so Danny's not going home, right? So I've already probably just started that morning at 6 a.m. It's now 5 p.m. and I'm like, there's no way they're going to release me.
No.
So they ask, because they have to ask, and I'm like, yeah, of course. So I stay on this job. Anyway, I'm listening for hours, and now there's a surveillance team. So I'm telling them what I'm getting in real time, and every time there's downtime, I'm now going backwards.
Yes.
And listening to previous...
Trying to clear.
Yeah, exactly. And people that were actually on the fringe of this job, that we now have new warrants for. So you're playing catch up, 4 or 5 different people, more than a phone each.
Oh.
It's not easy, and it's just you, right?
And the numbers, it's so easy to mess up the numbers.
Yeah,
because you identify people off their number.
Yeah.
In your head, you're like, oh, that's Bill Bloggs, and
this
that's
is
Joe Civilian and whatnot.
W 9 digits, right?
Yeah. But, one might have a 099 and the other one's 990.
Yeah.
And in your head, you can mix it up so easily.
Yeah. It's very difficult because there are warrant numbers, phone numbers, all these things, and then you're just using the systems to try to work out what's going on. And while you're onto it, there's another one flashing, and you're like, oh, crap, what do you prioritise, right? Anyway, so I'm in the zone. It's like a switchboard. It's like Homer Simpson at the nuclear power plant. Those friggin' buttons.
Danny's in the Matrix.
Yeah, I'm just friggin' pressing. But so you're in the zone, you're just focused, right, onto this stuff. Anyway, there's like a little strobe light starts going off in the office. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I got no time for this thing. Anyway, then all of a sudden, an alarm starts sounding.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, this is frustrating. And it's loud. And like, whatever. Anyway, I'm putting the headphones in and just trying to listen to what this is, because it's a live call. So I'm taking notes. Anyway, the alarm doesn't come off, and it feels like it's been forever. So I get this bang on the door, and, you put signs up so no one interrupts you. So I'm like, who's this idiot? I open the door, it's fireys. And they're like, what are you still doing here? Like, the fire alarm's been, evacuation for this building. And I walk out, and some other detective walks out who's in the other room. It's quite funny. And we know each other because we're always there. And he looks at me, starts laughing. He goes, you and I are the only ones that didn't leave, right? Ends up luckily being a false alarm, right? Yeah. And I go to him, so what have you got? He goes, well, I got a live armed robbery follow happening, right? He goes, what do you got? I go, oh, well, I don't know. It could be a murder, it could be a kidnapping, whatever. So we both go back into the rooms to listen. Anyway, it's now 23 hours into my shift.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like zoned out. And what we do know is the location of where they're supposed to go
Yes.
to do the exchange. Right? There's multiple locations mentioned, but I call my supervisor really early in the piece and go, well, that's where they're going. So anything happens, let's keep someone there. Now remember, now we're into the next evening.
Yep.
All right? And it's like party time, and it's kind of a party location of where it is. So there's a lot of people, but there's, without giving up too much, you can't just walk into this place.
Yeah.
Right? There's a bit of access. So now I've got the surveillance team calling every 15 minutes, and that's not usual, right? And then I've picked up, they've lost him. They've lost him, right? So I'm like, okay, just go to where I told you. They go, what are you talking about? I go, the location of where they're supposed to go. He goes, no one's told us that.
Oh.
So no one relayed, and this is not a close place. So no one's relayed to the surveillance team anything in terms of where the ultimate direction is.
Oh.
The crew itself have split up. So even the people that they lost weren't the ones that ended up doing it. The other crew who have been at this location for hours, gone. So we don't know if the exchange happened. We don't know what's going on. All I know is I did, at that stage, 23 hours. It ends up being 27 or 28 hours in total of a shift. My longest overtime kind of I've ever done. And to absolutely no result.
Yeah.
And it was just like...
And that's the thing, like you throw all these resources and things and so much time and effort, like, surveillance team, they're not cheap. No. And also it's just hard, right? Like they work hard and there's a lot of... Surveillance is something you probably have to have an aptitude for.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I remember my kids love watching YouTube and they love watching like that dash cam videos or whatever else. I remember watching one time, it was like someone's at a set of lights, and then like 3 or 4 cars come up and they all punch through a red light, and they're like, "Wow, what's that?" I'm like, "You know what that is?" And they're like, "No, Dad, what's that?" I'm like, "That's the surveillance team."
Yeah.
They're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah," because one car goes with them and the other ones have to slow down and you caught at a red, but once they're out of view, you got to keep up.
Yeah.
You're punching through reds.
Yeah.
And, for the rest of the community, they're just like, look at these idiots, what are they doing, But it's kind of like, we spoke about green light corridors and things like that. There is things going on that you don't realise.
And that's the thing, and what I've found in our transition to running our investigations company, obviously we do a lot of surveillance, and a lot of our jobs require surveillance. Mm-hmm. And people have this unrealistic expectation of what surveillance can be done and what can be achieved. And I think one of the most common myths I have to demystify to the client when they contact Precision for surveillance is, no, we're not using one agent. I'm not using one guy for this or one girl for this. Like, they don't understand that, and I kind of put it to them as, do you ever get that feeling you're being followed? They're like, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
Right? If you use the same person, right, and who's just ghosting you, doing whatever you're doing, shadowing you, your intuition's going to kick in, and it's not difficult to do anti or counter surveillance for one person. And even that, as we know, like with the police, we're using 6 up to 8, sometimes more, with air support and now the drone support and all that kind of stuff. In the corporate space or in the private space, that's a very expensive exercise.
And the funny thing is, when I know I've been reaching out to contractors when we've had an overflow of surveillance work, and I get these guys like, "Yeah, I can do one-man follows." I'm like, "No, you can't. No, if you do it, your target doesn't know that they're being surveilled and they're just completely oblivious."
Yep.
Or second of all, and the more likely instance is you put a tracker on the car, which is highly illegal. Yep. And I'm not going to put my guys in line of fire. I'm not going to sacrifice my reputation, my integrity, my license to be an investigator. So, someone can cheap out on surveillance and track their partner while they think they're having an affair,
Or get belted being under someone's car that you shouldn't be.
Yeah, like it's just, there's a whole bunch of things you're like, why would you do this? But there are people, there's cowboys in our current industry that really do make life difficult. But Hollywood, it's that Hollywood. Yeah. Oh my goodness, I have relatives that like cop shows, and I can't talk to them about it because they're like, oh, but I watch them. And they do this. They do surveillance, and they're just exactly across the street, directly opposite someone, and they've got the long lens camera, and they don't get noticed. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, no, forget that. Yeah. That's not happening.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? You're right. It's an absolute science, and straight away, people may assume, oh, because you're a cop, you've done surveillance. No, very few police actually have done surveillance. Unless you were in certain units, you wouldn't do it.
And if you get the training, it's one thing, but there's like different levels of course, right? Some guys say they're surveillance trained, they've done a 1-day course. Yeah. Some of them have done 3-day courses. And then I think the better of them get a 2-week course. Yeah, 2-week course. And then there's the 6 or 8 week course that the team do, like to be surveillance operatives, but then they roll into a established surveillance team. Yep. And like you said, they're running a 6 or 8. And they've got multiple vehicles, and they're all covert, running out of covert locations, doing stuff. It's a whole different ballgame. But yeah, a lot of cops. And look, my own experience, I've been burnt doing surveillance in the cops, but I learnt from that. Yeah. And look at me. I mean, I look like an accountant.
Well, a police siren will do that to you. Yeah. or the ones that do when they got the massive holster just sticking out, bulging from the jacket. Yeah, like, what are you doing? My favourite surveillance faux pas was seeing one of the officers is dressed in like civvies, or civilian attire, and wearing the police boots. Why?
Yeah, why?
Like, why did you stop there?
Someone else told me a story about a cop doing surveillance wearing an NYPD t-shirt.
Yeah. It's called hiding in plain sight.
No, dude, no.
It's funny. So I find like surveillance is, when you're good at it, it's amazing. Yeah. And we're lucky we've got some amazing operatives that do that stuff for us. And sometimes it's like, especially understanding a human that walks out of a building and just, you don't know where his vehicle's parked, for example, then he jumps in the car and takes off. Well, how would you like that followed? Yeah. Like it needs multiple agents. Yep. Then you got others, people that are kind of surveillance aware, is what we call surveillance aware. If you've got targets that are surveillance aware, they won't use their vehicles. They'll jump into an Uber or jump into a cab. That's right. And then again, you've got issues. So it's not that easy. It's a coordinated operation which takes multiple resources, and it's something we constantly try to look for. What are the alternatives to just purely surveillance response? Because it's a very difficult thing, and at the end of the day, you can take people's money and just throw, well, we lost him. But it doesn't. There's no bang for buck, and it doesn't really. You're not doing a service.
You've got to. That's right. I say to all the clients, you need a return on investment, but understand surveillance is the one that often yields the least. Yeah. Because invariably that's the day they don't leave or they don't go out, or something. Their plans change or whatever else. So, yeah. It is.
And it's funny how everyone's like, oh, I saw undercover car. No, they're not undercover cars, mate. Like a detective's vehicle, a plainclothes vehicle is not an undercover vehicle. It's it's not like. We know that if you walk up to it, you can see police stuff inside it. That's not the definition of undercover. Yeah. Right? And it's just people don't they think of someone, he was undercover cop. No, he's a detective or a plainclothes officer for an anti-theft team or whatever it is. They don't know the distinction between what undercover is, because undercover cops actually don't get busted.
No, that's right. The unmarked car is there to blend in a little bit more. Same as the cops wearing civilian clothes. They're not covert operatives like surveillance or literal undercover operatives doing that kind of work. Yeah. So,
maybe something we could discuss later on. The difference between the different units, street-level operatives and undercover.
Yes, but true. Yeah. All right, team. Well, I think that kind of sums it up for today. Look, thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of that. I hope everybody recognises that, as much as I do like to blow my own horn sometimes, I've made more than my fair share of mistakes. But hey, look, at least I've learned from them, I hope. So, Danny, who are we sponsored by?
Sponsored by the wonderful team at IC Technology. That's ictechnology.com.au for all things IT and managed IT services especially.
Indeed. And if you want to get Danny or I or the services of our team, you can find us at privateinvestigatorsydney.com.au. Thanks, team.
See you next time.